Assessment Task 1B, Health Resource. Healthy Eating, a curriculum kit for South Australian primary schools, is an Australian health education resource. This resource is a collection of food and nutrition-related information from sources such as Right Bite, Go for 2 and 5, and Eat for Health. I will be analysing pages 8 and 9 of this resource. These pages contain an infographic on how to understand food labels and an accompanying page which explains the meaning of nutrition claims. This resource targets the Australian curriculum HPE focus area Food and Nutrition. After reading through the resource and comparing to the Australian curriculum, I decided it would be highly appropriate in a Year 5 classroom. In practice, I would use this resource when teaching the comparison of product labels on food items or nutritional information, which is an elaboration of the content descriptor, plan and practice strategies to promote health, safety and well-being under the sub-strand contributing to healthy and active communities and the strand personal, social and community health. Not only does this resource link directly to the content intended to be covered when following the Australian curriculum, it can also be used in conjunction to the teaching of the 5 HPE propositions. When analysing this resource with a health literacy lens, I was able to critique sections according to the 3 dimensions: functional, interactive and critical. The resource is found to be highly useful when examined under the functional dimension of health literacy, which essentially encompasses an individual's ability to read health-related texts in everyday life. Every person I collected feedback from noted that they found the resource relatively easy to read as it was quite well presented. However, one of my Year 5 students noted that the smaller writing was hard to read, which might be in part my error as I provided her with a resource in A4. To overcome this confusion, perhaps the resource could be blown up to an A3 page for use in the classroom. Another issue is that there were no pictorial representations of the information outlined on page 9. The university lecturer noted that you get quite a lot of information from diagrams. Since the information on that page is quite wordy, the inclusion of diagrams would play to the strengths of students who prefer to process information visually. Interactive health literacy, which refers to an individual's ability to actively participate with and make meaning from health texts, is an important aspect of this resource as it aims to enable the reader to interact with food labels. The state school educated Year 5 student gave feedback which related the resource to their own lives. This is an example of how the target age group for this resource are able to make connections between the resource's information and their lives. The other Year 5 student highlighted that she had trouble reading a few discipline-specific words. To overcome this, I would suggest one of 2 things to be implemented. Either the resource include an accessible glossary at the bottom of the page, or for the classroom teacher to support the students in finding the meaning of those words. My fellow second-year pre-service teacher critiqued that, instead of having a focus on losing weight by limiting foods on page 8, it should say something along the lines of, you can use the label to help you maintain a healthy diet to promote a more positive connection to food and their bodies. According to the World Health Organization, as cited by Alfred Brown, health literacy means more than being able to read pamphlets and make appointments, but is also how people use that information to critically implement changes to better their health and the health of those under their influence. Each of the people I connected feedback from connected this resource with something they could do to take action. The critical dimension of health literacy is highly prevalent in another of their propositions, include a critical inquiry approach. This proposition engages students in critical inquiry processes where they ask questions about the resources and apply new knowledges to their lives now and in the future. This how-to resource enables critical inquiry as it educates about food labels, and it further promotes critical inquiry through a strengths-based approach, as page 9 provides information to understand the parts of a food label which builds upon their prior knowledge. This allows students to critique the nutrition of ingredients in meals and then suggest improvements, which links directly to the identified content descriptor. A distinct link to this proposition is how each person who gave me feedback, regardless of their starting knowledge, asked questions that would lead to critical inquiry which engaged higher order thinking skills. My peers shared that, from reading that resource, she began to consider if she should start reading nutrition information on the food she consumes. Increasing that sentiment, the state school educated Year 5 student began to plan an inquiry using the resource to analyse foods to discover which foods they should and should not be eating. One of my university lecturers outlined an inquiry strategy in their feedback. If I was to apply that strategy, I would run a lesson after an introduction to the resource, where each student will analyse the common food products consumed by the class and suggest improvements to those meals, as required in the Australian curriculum. I found it interesting that one of the Year 5 students inquired about the application of this resource in managing allergies. This demonstrates how the resource can spark the natural curiosity of primary students, which a teacher can then guide to deepen their knowledge of health concepts. In conclusion, this resource directly links to the Australian curriculum HPE while also engaging the students in the propositions to develop health literacy and the inclusion of critical inquiry approach while playing to the strengths and prior knowledge of the students. Therefore, this is a quality health resource that can be utilised, with a few improvements, to further students' health education.